my topic of discussion is Azure Data Factory. How many of us are aware of this product? I think everyone. So essentially, this product is a Microsoft Azure product, and it's part of the Azure portal. It is primarily used for data warehousing and ingestion pipelines. So essentially, think about that. If you want to bring all your data from your traditional databases, or from your Azure SQL databases, or from your Oracle databases, and you want to store data in a data lake or a warehouse, like Synapse warehouse, or in Parquet files, or anywhere in your company environment, you would use ADF to write pipelines to copy over data from the silos and bring it to a single point, which is your centralized data warehouse, right? So that is one of the use cases of using ADF. There are other use cases too, like you would, if you want to write specific pipelines for specific needs, you could do that. I've done that in my, multiple applications that I support. One of the, today's demo, I just want to do a quick demo since I have limited time. Essentially, I just want to show you how an ADF pipeline looks like, right? So with the basic activities that we have, so on the left hand side, you see these. So the activities are right here. I've just created a demo pipeline here for you guys to look at. And essentially, this is right now what it's doing is it's copying a CSV file which is stored in my blob into the Azure SQL database. Now all these are local resources, and that's running on my local Azure environment. So they are a little slower compared to the regular environments that we use. Essentially, so the copy activity essentially it's basically you have a source and then you have a sink. So the source and sink are terminologies that the Azure Data Factory uses. Those are the specific terminologies. And then there is also another terminology where you configure your data set, and each data set has its own link services. So essentially, the first entry point to create a pipeline, and then a copy activity is a link service. So I created a link service here. Essentially, it's going to my blob storage, and that's why I've named it this way. And there is a storage account and account key that I'm connected to. So this is part one. And the second thing is that I have to create a data set for that link service. So imagine that's the connection, and I'm actually creating a specific data set to go to a blob, which is NYC air quality, which I've created here. I'll just show it to you real quick. Right here is my blob storage account container. And then this is the blob blob storage container that I've created. And there is a CSV file, which is like just a generic CSV file I've downloaded from the web. Essentially, this is how it looks like in terms of data. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. I might have air quality. Here we go. So we look at the data here. Show you here real quick. This is just location specific data. The air quality there, right? Just very basic. So I want to load this data into a Azure SQL, and without writing a single line of code. How do I do that in ADF, right? So I point my data set to that blob right here, and I can define my compression types, right? Right now it's no compression. You could do gzip, deflate, things like that, tar format. Then you could define your delimitation, like is it tab delimited, comma delimited, semicolon delimited, row identifiers. That sometimes the rows have different like line feeds or RNN, carriage return, things like that. Encoding, if your files have specific encodings, and you can read different kinds of file, not just CSV, but you can read Excel, you can read JSON, you could read other file like Parquet and things like that. There's also escape characters in all, and then you can also define that my first row has headers so that it will not bring that in. So this is just the basic building blocks of a data set for the blob that you want to copy over. Now this is the source. I want to bring that to the sink, which is my destination, right? So the destination, you also have to define another link service and a data set right here. So I defined another link service, which is actually a connection string to my SQL database, which is just a basic, SQL database right here. Show it to you in a bit. This is my SQL database on the Azure. And then I have connected through a system assigned manage identity, which is what a preferable, it's a good way to, without giving credentials and things like that. And then you define the data set. to point to the specific table that you want to load that data. Now I had created the table in advance. This is the script that I'd used just to show you. Now there are options where you don't have to even create the table in advance. When it's writing, the ADF factory is writing the data, it will automatically create the table for you in the predefined format that you want. In this case, I had created this table in advance, and I just refer to the table that this is where I want all the data to go to. So I go back here, and this is all configuration, right? You could do a bulk insert here, right? Or you want to do one line by line, row by row insert. If you have an existing table, now this is what I was talking about. If I do an auto create table, it'll actually create a new table for me. I'll show you another example which I have, where I'm probably using, yeah, this one. I'm using auto create. So the mappings are some things that are interesting, that you can import the schemas and you can define one-to-one column mapping right here with their different formats. So for the most part, when you have a CSV file and a database, it'll automatically generate this mapping when you import the schemas. But there are cases where you have to predefine, I mean, you have to manually select source and target columns that, sometimes there is a mismatch and things like that. So there's a little bit of struggle here if you have like multiple, like 200 columns, for example, in a table. I have had that in the past, but that's the way it is for now. So now all you do is once your pipeline is now, so this is the copy activity, right? This is just one step. There are different stages here. Once it is successful, it goes to the next stage. You can also do a parallel, like for example here, I've activated here. This is another copy JSON to the database. Essentially the same thing, but a different file, right? And I'm using an auto create table right here, which will dynamically generate a new table for me. And then essentially it's the same stuff. But when I run this pipeline, both these activities will run in parallel. If I want to make it sequential, let's say it's dependent on certain things. So what I would do is I would just say on success. So once this is done, so I can make it sequential this way, or I can make it parallel by taking the connection out. Now there is also on failure. Now you can do it it's like a try catch block essentially. If you want if the activity fails, you want to log it, you can do it. You can define a log activity here or set variable activity, and then basically configure it here, right here, essentially. So that's one of the ways. And if you want this script activity to run after these two copy activities have completed successfully, you can do this. So this will not run until both of them have successfully completed. If one of these activities fail, the script activity is not going to run, right? And it'll go right away to the failure. You can also define a possibility that you don't want it to run on success, but just on completion, whether the outcome is a success or a failure. So essentially this way, right? So there are a lot of plenty of options. I've designed a lot of pipelines so far, being a data architect in my company, and I think Azure ADF is one of the best tools I've ever used for ETL kind of operations. So it's pretty handy. But yeah, I can run and show you. Now this is another script activity. Essentially what you do here is you define you have a link service that is connecting to an Azure SQL. So what I'm doing right now here is I'm just getting all my top 10 environmental data that I just copied over from a CSV file, and I'm just going to for the purposes of demonstration, the script activity goes through all the top 10 and then iterates through in the for each loop. And essentially the for each loop is basically going to the previous activity and getting individual rows. And if I show you the definitions, just basically going back and copying it to a blog. This is just for demonstration purposes. So it's basically going and checking if the item that's inside the for each exists. If it exists, then it will go and just drop it into the sink, which is writing as a Parquet file, right? So now again, this is another blob that I have, a data set for a different blob, and I'm just writing it as a Parquet file. So now you could do multiple things here, like this was just for demo purposes, but you could actually call an API, right? Let's say so in this for each, you want to call an API. There's a web activity here. You could define you can specify a method for your API, get, post, put, delete, your authentication headers like basic system identity, client principal, service principal, and things like that. And then send that item to a separate API, make an API call that way. I've done a lot of web API activities too, and they are pretty handy. So right now what we're doing in my organization is essentially calling the weather station to get data. We have a customized research lab where we have crop related data, and we are using ADF to call the API and then update our database tables accordingly. So, but I'm just going. This is just for demonstration purposes. I'm just going to do a simple basic pipeline that I'm going to run right now. Let's see if this should go through. And there are several options here. Like I didn't show you all the options, right? Like if you want to run a for each loop, you have a batch count. You can do multiple batches. Like it's like a parallel for each. Like you have a parallel.forEach code in .NET 9, .NET 8. It's exactly like this here. Like you can run hundreds of batches together. If you have millions of items, this is pretty handy and can speed up the operations. Sometimes I have faced issues like where the batches overlap and it tries to write the same record in the file. So for that purposes, I'm just going to show you one record at a time, right? Issue error. Wait a second. There is a pipeline. Oh, shoot. Yeah, this has to be defined. Now, there's a good handy feature is you validate and you find that it's like a compile time error that you get when you're writing code. It's exactly like that, right? So there's no variable defined in the pipeline. So I'll just take this activity out for now. I can and then publish it perhaps. Yep. And I'll just do a trigger. I mean, you could write now. The other good feature is that you could write different kinds of trigger. I'll just show you quickly the triggers that you can choose. There is a schedule trigger, which means that you want to run something like a batch run at specific time, daily, weekly, monthly, etc. You can configure all that. There's also a tumbling window where it is basically it will run in that specific tumbling window, and then basically continue to run in that window time frame. Storage event based, if there is something in the storage event that this is like an event based trigger that you can configure it, and then you can write your own custom events. So right, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to do a debug for now. What I like about ADF is the detail level of logs that you get out of it is amazing. It helps a lot to understand what's going on and gives you a visual perspective. Pretty easy to set up these pipelines and pretty fast. Permission wise, you just have to give your ADF account permissions like a system assigned or managed user assigned identity to that database that you want to connect to, or the blob storage or a file container that you want to connect to. So the copy activity is completed. Now it's going to query the top 10 records from the environmental data table, and essentially it's going to do a for each and copy that activity, or copy that as a Parquet file, maybe here somewhere, probably here. Yeah, I'll have to find out that place, but I think it is going to copy it over to the NYC air quality blob container. So you should see a part. Yeah, so the Parquet file has got generated here, right here, with all the data probably. So see if it's all done. Yeah, since we are doing sequential, it might take a while, and then I don't have all the resources or the horsepower that I need. So, but yeah, this is a pretty much like 5:30, like 15 minutes are probably done. I'll wait for questions if you have any.
Actually, I have two. So the Azure Data Factory, is it always running? Is it got a startup and shut down time or cost? How does that run in terms of resources?
Good question. The ADF has something known as a storage and the DUI. I'm not a lot into the pricing aspect of it, but I think it's all resource based. The number of resources that you consume, and it is based on the DUIs that you use.
Okay.
But I don't know the exact cost aspect. Maybe Sam knows more about it. Sam, do you have any insights on the cost part of it?
Not in great detail,
Yeah.
but I think your answer was correct with depending on the resources.
Yeah.
Like everything else in Azure, it comes in different tiers, and it depends on your usage, database size, etc. As far as
Yep.
like leaving it run for days at a time, depending on whether data comes in or out, I don't know if that incurs a cost or not.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a usage based cost, I believe. It's not running all the time, depending on your frequency and the resources it consumes. it's going to consume that many. I mean, you're going to incur the cost accordingly. But if your factory is running once a month, your cost will be different compared to if your data factory is running once a day or once every hour.
So
And
if I had,
also how much data it's moving, right?
okay, so if I had, 10 different ETLs throughout the course of a month, would it be one factory, independent factories?
I think it will be independent to each and every pipeline. That is my assumption.
Okay.
That might not be 100% accurate, but that's how I look at it. It is individual to what you are doing in terms of resources that
Okay.
each and every pipeline is consuming.
Okay. Equivalent to roughly an SSIS job.
Yes.
And then you used an Azure to Azure process.
Yes.
Can this pick up on-premise data
Perfect. Yep.
sources,
Yes, it
files,
can. So
databases, whatever?
that's a great question, John, because essentially you see here there's an integration runtime. I'll just show it to you. Where is the integration runtime? It has an integration runtime. If you want to if you want to basically load resources or data from your on-prem, you'll have to create something known as a self-hosted integration runtime, SHIR, which basically would allow your factory to access your on-prem environment. And of course, you'll have to open the ports
Mhm.
and create inbound, outbound rules from your
Mhm.
local server. That's what we have done in our team. So I know fairly a little bit about it. But there is an integration runtime setup somewhere here. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. So right now the auto resolve integration runtime is for Azure to Azure, right? But if you want have a scenario like what you described, you would create a new integration runtime, and that will be a self-hosted integration runtime like this.
Okay. Okay.
And this is a SHIR in short, self-hosted integration runtime.
Okay. All right.
And basically that will help you connect to your on-prem resources.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, very good.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank